lunch. So this is traditionally known as the graveyard shift. I don't know why that is. Anyone know why? So I'm conscious that in the next hour or so, lots of energy in your body is going to digest the food you've just eaten. So if you're feeling a little bit drowsy, or you need to sort of help yourself, listen, I won't be offended at all if you're feeling drowsy and you just stand up where you are, or you move around. Honestly, I will be more offended if you snore during the session. So please, honestly, I know what it's like. Many of you have had busy weeks and stuff, and so if you're feeling a wee bit weary, look, there's drinks over there. Go and make yourself a drink, come back, stand up if you need to. If that's going to help you, I won't be offended. If you do stand up and move around, obviously try and minimal distraction to everybody else. That'll help. So don't do what John Benny did and dance at the front. That will not help me at all. But genuinely, feel free to do that. Thank you for your openness in the first session. I appreciate that. Probably felt a little bit heavy. You go, John. But actually, there's no easy way to have that sort of a conversation. And the fact that you're here today means you're a serious follower of Jesus. You're taking followership of Jesus very, very seriously in your world. And there's also a desire for you to share that following Jesus in ways of helping lead or influence other people. So we have to create these sort of spaces so we can push each other a little bit. So even if you don't agree with absolutely everything I say, and feel free, you've paid your money, you take your choice on this. So if I say stuff you really don't agree with, just put it to the side. But what a day like today does, it just reminds us, it nudges us again into some of the big ideas we need to keep thinking about. And as I say, I've been doing this a long time, and I need to keep reminding myself of these ideas because they're so fundamental. And the problem with something being so fundamental is we sort of get used to it. We get familiar with it. And therefore, the minute you get familiar with anything, you get complacent with it. Isn't that right? And that's any part of your life, isn't it? Familiarity always, but Granny would have said, breeds contempt, doesn't it? Yeah. So it breeds this sense of them not always taking it seriously. So this is a little reminder, hopefully to encourage you and not in any way to make life more difficult for you. So we thought about a foundational idea, heart at the centre. This idea there's no differentiation between a so-called inner world and an outer world. That in the eyes of God, these worlds are the same. There's only one world. And that brought us to Proverbs, above all else, guard your heart. And we just lend into some of the imagery there. So, how do we guard the heart? How do we help the heart? Now, again, we could say a million things here, but I want to zero in on two core ideas that are absolutely bedrock to my own experience. So what I'm going to reflect with on you is something that I'm not just telling you to do, but something I am absolutely passionately committed to in the context of my own devotional well-being. Because that's what we are thinking about. And I'll describe the first one in terms of focus. It's a clumsy term in some ways, but it'll just help us as we go. That actually part of taking care of my inner world, forgive the division again, but part of taking care of my heart is really thinking about my focus, thinking about what I'm leaning into, thinking about what I'm looking at, what I'm hearing, what I'm feeding that inner world with. Okay? So if the heart is really important, and that heart, that centrality of that world influences everything around me, then I want to really think about intentionally what I am feeding that world with. Is that fair enough? Yeah. That's very, very straightforward, isn't it? So focus is a big issue for me. And by focus, I really want to lean into this idea of sort of worship, of developing a very intentional approach towards the Lord. Now here's words that you'll know very, very well. We've touched on these words before together, actually, as a community. This is the opening sentence of something called the Shema. Shema just literally means hear. That's sort of, and it's become then the heart of this confession. And these are the opening words of this great confession called the Shema. And it says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength." Okay? Now we could spend many sessions just looking at this, but this is sort of, so let me be really vulnerable with you. This is part of my everyday confessional practice. So one of the things that I've developed is training my heart towards certain ideas, or training my focus towards certain ideas. So this is partly because of my own journey. So the way I'm wired in a personality type, I can literally wake up in the morning, so some of you may identify with this, I can literally wake up in the morning, get out of bed, go straight to work. Like, literally start working. Okay? So I wouldn't need to wake up, I don't need a cup of coffee, I don't need a shower, even, although, but I could literally, my brain fires. In fact, sometimes, and this is total, I don't even know what this is, I can't even explain it to you, maybe someone with medical expertise can help me, but sometimes even before I consciously wake up, my brain is starting to move. I can hear my brain work before I open my eyes. This is really weird. I don't know how to explain this to you. Now, on a positive side, that can really make me very focused and get a lot of work done. The negative side is, the minute I wake up, my mind fills with all the stuff of that day that I've got to do. And so, because of that, I literally, over many years, have trained my heart to look at certain things. I've trained my mind to think about certain things, and I've trained my tongue to say certain things. And they're all about stopping me going to where my brain wants to go, and teaching me to go somewhere where I need to go before I go there. Alright, now if that doesn't make any sense to you, don't worry about it. The idea that I hope does make sense to you is the idea of training ourselves towards certain ideas. Yeah. To actually understand that our devotionality to the Lord is not just something that's left to the spontaneous, but it can be very intentional. Yeah. And as Pentecostals especially, people from a Pentecostal charismatic background, the idea of sort of spontaneous is really attractive. We like spontaneous. Oh, just felt the Spirit on me this morning. Okay? Love that. Love that. Right? But the idea of intentionality can be sound a bit dry and boring to some people. But for me, it's both and. But here's what I've discovered, so let me just be really vulnerable with you. I've had more days where I've needed to be intentional because of the absence of spontaneity. Yeah. If I went on how I felt when I got up in the morning, a whole bunch of things would happen that aren't necessarily bad, but they'll take me away from the things that I think need to happen. Yeah. So if I just leave that to spontaneous, then the danger is I'm moving away. So stuff like this has really helped me. And over the years I've developed a series, we might call it liturgy, but don't be put off by that word. But by liturgy what I mean is I've developed a series of confessions and ideas that are all about bringing my focus onto the Lord. Bringing my heart onto Him. Now for me, I love mornings. I'm a morning person. So the best time for me to do this is first thing in the morning. Now, for you, that may not be helpful. So don't worry about when. Think more about what at the moment. Wherever you do this, but it's the idea of bringing my mind, my heart, intentionally to focus on Him. All right? And here's what I've discovered. The more intentional I am with that, the more spontaneous I become. It's like stuff happens at a spontaneous level more because you're being intentional with that. Now, I love spontaneity. You feel moved. You get the sense the Holy Spirit's moving on. Wonderful. Love all of that. But in the absence of those feelings, in the absence of those impulses, what do? We train our hearts to look and listen to the right things. Okay? Now that could sound dry and boring and mundane, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. It's an intentional action with that. This is the idea behind it. Here's what the Lord's saying. Israel, I need you to hear something. I want you to hear something. Right? And that's at the heart of this idea to hear is the Lord wants Israel to hear something. Now, what does He want Israel to hear? Very, very simple. He wants Israel to hear who He is. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Okay? And secondly, He wants Israel to hear not only who He is, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, but He wants Israel to hear what He wants. Now look at this.
Yeah.
And you shall love. So there are two things going on here. God wants Israel to hear who He is. God wants Israel to hear what He wants. Alright? Now, before we talk about leading other people, before we talk about building great churches and great organizations and great strategies, this is the heart of everything. That actually, as followers of Jesus, as people learning to lead ourselves, what are the big ideas we need to focus on? Who He is, what He wants. That's it. That's it. That's it. Distilled down to the most simplest idea. That actually, my call as a follower of Jesus is to be open to hearing who He is and hearing what He wants. Right? So at the heart of our spirituality are two very simple ideas. Two very simple ideas. A revelation of God. Now don't be scared by the word revelation, but revelation there, let me put it in its a definition that really helps me. Revelation is seeing it for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
Alright? So however it comes, revelation is seeing it for yourself. I get it for myself. I see this. I'm not just seeing it because you see it, I'm seeing it because I see it. Alright? I'm not just repeating something you've said, I've heard it for myself. So at the heart of our journey as followers of Jesus, there is this quest, this desire to know Him more, to hear who He is. Because as spiritual leaders, we want to help to lead people towards that idea. We want people to go on a discovery of finding out who He is. In the same way that we have discovered who He is. Is that fair? Mm-hmm. Right? So we're wanting to lead people towards that. And so for me then, as a leader who's also spiritual, as a leader of other people who's also a follower of Jesus, then I want to be very intentional about being open to hearing who He is. Okay, now I know this sounds really sort of obvious, and well, yeah, of course. But I believe that is something that needs to be essential and intentional in our spiritual life. No matter how long we've been followers of Jesus, we want to be open every day to know more about Him, to learn more about Him, and to allow that reality to become part of our experience. Because we're not just leaders, we are spiritual leaders. We're not just leading an organisation, we are leading people to Jesus. We are walking them to Him. And then out of that revelation, it's a response. It's the idea of hearing who He is, but then hearing what He wants and doing what He wants. That's at the heart. If I could distill the church down to its most simplest elements, my experience down, that's really it. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. So Israel, here's what I want you to hear. I want you to hear who I am. And then, out of that, I want you to hear what I want. And that's at the heart of our journey as followers of Jesus. Now, let's go back to thinking about the heart. So why is that important for the heart? Because if we realize that the heart is the wellspring of everything else, then that engagement with the Lord Himself, who He is, what He wants, is the primary idea that's going to maintain health in our hearts. That's the thing above all other things that's going to both protect us, help us, and feed us. Okay?
Yeah, that's good.
So that we're not just speaking out of information about the Lord, but we're speaking out of revelation of the Lord. You with me?
Yeah.
So, what we don't want to be as spiritual leaders is just telling people information, although that's important, but we want to be able to lead them out of revelation, lead them out of what we actually know in our experience. It's the difference between, someone has likened it in a different context to being a travel agent or a tour guide. A travel agent tells people information about where they want to go without necessarily ever having been there. Oh, I'd love to go to Malta. So the travel agent gets a brochure out. It says, here's our resorts in Malta, it's beautiful. Have you ever been? No. But I've heard it's great, and the brochures are great. And so what you've got is someone telling you information about where you want to go, but they've never been there. But a tour guide is someone who's been, walked the path, and knows the little intimacies about that path that are not in the brochures. Right?
Yeah, that's good.
So spiritual leadership is not about saying, oh yeah, you want to go there. Spiritual leadership says, let me take you over there. That I know where over there is. Right? We're leading people in that. And at the heart of that is a vibrancy of our relationship with the Lord. Now can I say this? But please do not be offended by what I'm about to say. You can be leading a church and completely backslidden. You can be leading a church and completely backslidden.
Yeah.
Because you can be leading a church out of gift. You can be leading a church out of information. And actually not be leading a church out of the vibrancy of your own soul. You with me? Okay? So if you're gifted enough and clever enough, and you know enough, there's enough there to say to people, oh, you should be over there.
Yeah.
I've got the brochure. You need to be over there. And you can do all of that without actually vibrantly, intimately engaging with the Lord yourself. Now, we don't want that to happen. So That's the extreme version of what we talked about this morning. Separating one world from another, and we end up then becoming peddlers of information about God, rather than people who are speaking out of our revelation of them. You with me?
Yeah.
I know this is heavy, I know this is tough. But this is what we've got to keep drilling into here, because that's what's going to guard our heart. What's going to guard our heart is not what you know informationally, but what you know revelationally.
Yeah.
A great example of this in the resurrection stories of Jesus and the disciples. And Thomas happens to be out of the room when Jesus turns up. Would happen to be Thomas, wouldn't it? And Jesus turns up, and then he disappears, and Thomas comes back, and the disciples say this: "We have seen the Lord." But Thomas says, "Unless I see." Now, we criticize Thomas, and Jesus sort of criticizes Thomas too, but sort of Thomas is onto something here, in my opinion. Here's what Thomas is saying: I can't live on what you've seen. I have to live on what I've seen. Now, Jesus eventually challenges Thomas, and he does that, I think, for our benefit. And he says to Thomas, "Blessed are those who believe, but haven't seen."
Yeah.
Now, there's a lucky play in the idea, because in order to believe, you have to see. But what Jesus means is, blessed are those who will see, but not with the physical eye, but with the eye of the heart. And those who've seen with the eye of the heart and believe, but don't need to see with the physical eye. Now, but if you hold the whole passage in tension, Thomas is sort of saying something that we shouldn't neglect. Thomas is saying, I can't go on what you've seen. I have to go on what I've seen.
Yeah.
All right? And I just want, I know that's very, very, on one level, simple for us and people in this room, but I just want to encourage that. Let me be very careful what I say. I made a decision many years ago. I would only say it if I've seen it. What I don't want to be is a professional Google preacher. Or I need a sermon on, so let me go to Google, get a great sermon from another preacher, rehash it, and preach it to you. That's not helpful. So I don't want to become that. So I made a decision, I will only say what I see. Alright? So whether you agree with me or not, or like it or not, everything I've said to you today, I'm saying it of what I've seen. I'm saying it of what is real. So if no one in the world agreed with me, I'd still be living by these principles because I've seen them. I've seen something that I'm living out of. So that's what I mean by that. We're not just leaders who are telling people where to go, we're leading them. We're not just telling them about God, we're speaking out about what we know about God. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I know you know this, but let me encourage you. So, a couple of big ideas for we'll land this practically. We cannot be devoted to what we do not know.
Yeah.
So, a friend of mine last Valentine's Day put a post on Facebook, and I wanted to make a comment, but I've got a rule. I never make any controversial comments on Facebook. It's the wrong place to do it. So, fun comments, informational comments, inspirational comments. If it needs to be a serious comment, it's a DM. It's a private message. We'll take it offline. But he made this comment, and I know exactly what he meant on Valentine's Day. He said, my wife is the most amazing woman in the world. And I wanted to just add a little comment to you. Not the most amazing woman in the world to me. Right?
Yeah.
Right? She's amazing to Because as far as I'm concerned, the woman I'm married to is the most amazing woman in the world.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah.
Right? Now, yeah, absolutely. And on we go. So that little to you makes all the difference. What's he doing? He is speaking of his devotion of what he knows. But I don't know her. I don't share a bed with her. I haven't shared a life with her. I haven't raised children with her. I don't know who she is. But as far as he is concerned, right?
Yeah.
Now here's the thing. I can never be devoted to her the way he is.
Yeah.
Because his devotion is coming out of what he knows. Now I'll take his word for it. She's amazing. Not as amazing as Dawn, but she's amazing. So I'm going to take his word for it.
Yeah.
But I can never adore her like him. John, what's your point? Well, the point is that actually, if we're not careful in the Christian world, we sort of almost subconsciously force this. We push people towards being devoted out of what someone else has said, instead of really encouraging them to be devoted out of what they say. Alright? And that's why discipleship is an ongoing, never-ending, continuous conversation. It's never a one-off thing. Or, okay, I've arrived, we're constantly learning and growing and developing. And that's why you'll have some people in church passionately worshipping the Lord when certain songs are put up, or when certain ideas are put up. They're excited and they're off there, and you're gone. Because they've seen something. Right? They've heard something. And that's why this idea of opening up our hearts to Him is so important on our ongoing growth as leaders. Whether you are a young Christian or an ancient Christian, it's the same conversation. But for the ancient ones among us who've been doing this a long time, the danger is familiarity. And comfort. I know the Lord. But there's more to know. And the danger is we can impose what we know on others, whereas actually what it's really about is encouraging people to make their journey. Make sense?
Yeah.
We cannot worship from another's wonder. We can only worship out of what we hear and we know. And that's why this idea of focus is so important. That we want to every day or regularly open up our hearts to Him so that we see and hear Him. So that something of a worship comes from our own hearts. And we cannot become from another's because. Let me explain that. We cannot do it out of your conviction. We can only do it out of our conviction. Okay?
Yeah.
So let's think about that individually. As followers of Jesus, these are really important ideas that actually we are opening ourselves up to focus on Him so that our hearts become tender to who He is and what He wants. And then out of that, we worship, we proclaim, we confess, we live. But we recognize that same principle has to happen in others. And so when we're leading others, what we're careful to do is not impose on them what we see, but rather teach them the principles of learning to see for themselves, of hearing for themselves.
Yeah.
Alright? If you can't see it, you can't see it. And telling people who can't see it doesn't help. Right? What we've got to create is the environment where they can see, where their hearts are open. And what's really interesting, going back to Thomas, it's a whole week between Jesus appearing to the disciples and then appearing to Thomas. A whole week where Thomas is like twiddling his thumbs and waiting. And that's the beauty of this story, that the community gave Thomas the opportunity to wait for the revelation. Didn't force it, waited for it. And in leading others, leading ourselves, this is important, but in leading others, this is really important. If people are following because of what we see, the minute we're not there, they'll go back to what they see. Won't they?
Yeah.
If they're worshipping out of what we hear, when the music stops, they'll go back to their normal confession. Okay? Whereas what we want to do is reach a place where, music or not, I can worship. Whether you're in the room or not in the room, I believe. Why? Because we're operating out of what we see and what we hear. Is that okay? Does that make sense to you?
Yep.
Within that. So, how can we create an environment like that in our world? And just a couple of practical things. So this is what I do. Because we can't make people see. We can't just make ourselves see. But we can create an environment where seeing and hearing becomes more likely. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So if, revelation is seeing something for yourself, and that revelation comes from God, we can't just like abracadabra that. But what we can do is create a framework, a context where that becomes more possible. Where our hearts become hungry and expectant. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Alright, and these are three things that have profoundly helped me in this journey. Number one, pray. Now, I know this sounds really obviously, but every day I pray prayers something like this. Open my eyes, that I may see wonderful things in your world. There's not a day goes by when I don't ask the Lord to open my ears and open my eyes, that I would see Him in my everyday world. Okay? Or through the scriptures, or through whatever I'm going through. So the idea that actually we recognize we need to see or hear some stuff about Him and from Him. So what does that do? It positions us to be intentional about asking for that. Lord, help me to see who you are. Lord, help me to hear who you are. Now, over the years I've developed a number of confessions that help that. So I say confessions every day like, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. I say confessions like, Jesus, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. I remind myself that He is compassionate and gracious. He's slow to anger. He's abounding in loving kindness. So I use words from the Bible to help my heart. But every day I pray, Lord, help me to see. Help me to hear. Help me to know who you are. Because we need His help to do that. Alright? That's part of devotional well-being. Here's from Paul. Paul prays for a church just like ours. And Paul says this, I keep asking that our God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ may give you the spirit of wisdom and revelation so that you will know Him. Now look at that carefully. Keep asking so that you will know Him better. So he's praying so that you'll know Him better. And what's he praying for? Spirit of wisdom and revelation. Wisdom is hearing something. Revelation is seeing something. You know?
Yeah.
So Paul is praying for the church in Ephesus that they would hear and see. Hear and see. Hear and see for themselves. Hear and see what? Well, hear and see something that would help them know Him better.
Yeah.
That's what we're all about. We're about knowing him better, hearing who he is, hearing what he wants, sharing that with the community, sharing that with our world. And that's part of our everyday experience. And he goes on and he sort of repeats the prayer in a slightly different way. He says, I pray that the eyes of your heart will be enlightened so that you will know the hope to which you've been called. It's virtually an echo of the first prayer. Okay, so he prays in the first bit of the prayer for wisdom, what you hear, in Revelation, what you see, so you'll know better. Look at this one. I pray that the eyes of your heart, your vision, will be enlightened, your hearing, your understanding. So that what? So that you'll know the hope. I love this. And in my own journey as a follower of Jesus, this has become, can I say this carefully, has become confessional prayer in my life. Lord, open my eyes. Lord, give me the spirit of wisdom and revelation so that I will know you. Enlighten my heart. Help my heart to see what it needs to see so that I can know the hope to which I believe. Make that part of your experience. Make that part of your prayer. It's because our knowing of him is not just a brain thing. It's a heart thing. Right? It's not just information in our head, it's revelation in our heart. And that's an important idea for our spiritual maturity. Secondly, I would encourage you, we'll do a wee bit more on this in the final session. I'll call it prime. Prime your heart with the words you read. Okay, now we'll come back to reading the Bible in the last session. We'll do some practical work on that in the last session. But in many of our Bibles, in this Bible on the screen, the words of Jesus are in red. Can I say this? I'm mesmerized at the amount of Christians who don't read the words of Jesus. We are, after all, Christians, right?
Yeah.
Followers of Jesus. And many of us in the church have reduced the Gospels down to stories about Jesus. But remember, the stories about Jesus also contain 99% of the words of Jesus.
Yeah.
And here's what I've discovered. If I want my eyes open to Jesus, and I want my ears open to hear Jesus, I need to read Jesus.
Yeah.
Come on now.
Yep.
I know this is like mind-blowing rocket science, isn't it? John, it's really simple. Absolutely, it is really simple. We overcomplicate a lot of this, and we make it sound like white knuckle right. But actually, as followers of Jesus, if I want to see Jesus, and if I want to hear Jesus, where should I start?
Yep.
With the bits of the Bible that deal with Jesus. There. Make that part of your reading. So my personal practice is I rotate the Gospels constantly. So whatever else I'm reading in the Bible, we'll talk about that next session, I read Jesus every day. Every day. Read a bit of Jesus. Try and hear Jesus. Even the bits I don't like.
Yeah.
You know those bits that Jesus said you wish weren't in the Bible? And you go, oh, right? But I want to see Jesus. I want to hear Jesus. I want to be open to Jesus. And one of the ways we can help our eyes and help our ears is that we prime our eyes and we prime our ears with the sort of conversation that's leading us towards them. Okay? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
And here's the last idea, and we'll have a break, because you can tell you need a break.
Sure.
I would say the third idea is, if you like, the people we are with. So pray, prime, and the people. And here's what I've discovered as an idea and a concept. When I'm around Jesus-loving people, like I'm not just talking about people who attend church, but when I'm around Jesus lovers, Come on now.
Yeah.
All right? Something in the depth of my heart gets drawn out to this. And that's why I'm very careful about the friendships I make. Very careful about the voices that I allow into my world and the people that I connect to, because you can have people who love the church, but that passion for Jesus isn't. There's more passion for the church, more passion for their job, more passion for the organisation than there is passion for him.
Yeah.
And to be around people who just love him is a real primer to this idea. You know, the two that walked with Jesus on the road to Emmaus, when they got to the end of the road, their eyes were open and they saw Jesus. Here's what they said: "Did not our hearts burn within us?" Now, I'm not saying you can do that every day with these, but have people like this in your world. People who love Jesus, and people who are passionate for Jesus, and who will help them. I love that. So I want you to, feeding the heart, guarding the heart, is about being intentional, about positioning the heart towards him. This won't just happen. It will happen because we want it to happen. It will happen because we're intentional about happening. And we can train our hearts towards giving our hearts the chance to see him and hear him, because we are positioning ourselves toward him. And the more we do that, the greater the opportunity comes for information about him to become revelation.
Yeah.
And revelation moves us from something that we feel we have to do to something we want to do. And that's crucial for spiritual growth. That makes sense to you? Shall we have a break? Any questions or reflections? I'm going to give you a good 10-15 minute break, and we'll wrap it up with one final session. We're going to be finished by 3, so people have to go. Any questions or reflections before we give you a wee break? Give you a stretch?
What did you may want to talk about pride?
Yeah.
I've missed that bit, but how you worded it.
Yeah. So let's go back for you. So in terms of pride, it's this idea that we can't make revelation happen. Because Paul teaches us that revelation seems to come from the Lord. He's the one who opens our eyes. So what do? We just passively sit back. No, what we try to do then is prime the situation by create an environment of expectancy, create an environment of openness and hunger. And one of the ways we create or prime that is to, when it comes to Jesus, for example, actually the Gospels reveal not only the stories of Jesus, but who Jesus is, the words of Jesus. So it makes sense that if I could approach the words of Jesus, the stories of Jesus, that what I'm doing is giving my heart the opportunity to see him or hear him in a fresh way. We'll talk about maybe how we do that next session in terms of reading the Bible. But so for me, it's about positioning. Priming is about positioning yourself to a place where you are maybe, can I say this carefully, giving the Lord the opportunity to reveal himself to you, or making it more possible that you're going to catch something from him. In the ancient world, they would talk about walking in the dust of the rabbi. So walking so close to the rabbi that literally his dust went over them. Now, in order to get his dust, you've got to get close. So So I'm not talking about religiousness here, I'm just talking about positioning yourself in a way that allows the dust to get over you. And one of the ways we've got available to us are literally the red bits of the Bible. Literally, the words and stories of Jesus. And I don't care how long you've been a Christian. I've been a Christian as long as most people in this room have been. So I've been a Christian since I was 8 and I'm 55. So that will probably be toe to toe with most in the room in terms of the oldest followers of Jesus here. And I am getting more out of the Gospels today than I've ever got in my life. And I've read them all my life. But I'm reading them slower and more devotionally. I'm not looking for information about Jesus. I'm looking for revelation. Alright? Now that's no guarantee. But it's like fertilizing the soil. Giving this conversation a chance. By positioning yourself close to that. That's all we're doing. Does that make sense?